Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your time and attention and your want and need to learn something new. We are here today with Daniel.Meara and Phil.Glick from 1-800-GAMBLER and the Council on Compulsive Gambling. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. They're sort of going to take over this lunch and learn. But if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and any resources that you may have will be listed in the link below once this is transferred into our YouTube channel.
Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Dan.Meara. Phil is kind of ducking in and out here, but so we are from the Council on Compulsive Gambling, also known, maybe better known and more easily known as 1-800-GAMBLER. That's a helpline for people who may or do have a problem with gambling. We have a great array of resources available on our website. We take calls from problem gamblers. We have resources to refer them to, including Gamblers Anonymous. Although we're not affiliated with Gamblers Anonymous, we certainly, one of the things we'll do is point people in the direction of meetings. In COVID times, of course, we can steer them to in-person or online meetings. I should say that the council is agnostic on gambling. We don't endorse gambling and we don't condemn gambling, but we seek to help people if they get in trouble with gambling, which is happening to a greater degree because of the ease with which we can place a bet on our phones. That's affecting all populations. But it certainly is impacting youth, which we'll talk more about as we go through this. And one of the things that I've had in my personal experience, I have some younger family members who, through sports betting, dug a pretty deep hole for themselves and got in trouble. So, and they were with the Super Bowl approaching and March Madness not far off, they were they were concerned, and so I actually steered one of my nephew to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. So I'm going to I'll talk a little bit about my background, which is much more in substance use. I'm fairly new to gambling addiction, quite new, and so Phil.Glick, who is both someone in recovery from gambling addiction, and has been working here at the council longer than me, is going to help out and fill in the gaps for me. So thank you, Phil, and I'll let you say hello.
Sure, I'll just do an intro at this point. I am Phil, and I am a recovering compulsive gambler. And although we mentioned we're not affiliated with Gamblers Anonymous, I go to Gamblers Anonymous meetings, and I like to tell people that right off the jump that I believe strongly in GA, but I believe strongly in this helpline as well. And we try to offer support, treatment, and hope to the person who calls with in need of all of those things. And we get a lot of loved ones calling, a lot of gamblers calling who aren't sure if they have a problem or not, and a lot of problem gamblers calling. We get some calls that don't really belong here, but we try to handle them as in a kind manner and handle the people who need help, and we try to give them that help when they call. And just for some reference, my last bet was in 2017. So I take recovery seriously. I've been at it more than 4.5 years now, and we'll try to keep that going. But now back to Daniel.
Okay, so you'll notice, like I remember in the substance field when the language change and the language focus turned to recovery more, and we use that here at the Council on Compulsive Gambling as well. Like it, as Phil just gave that example of, it's been however long since his last bet. So that's important. I was involved with establishing a substance use advocacy group, which maybe some of you know of at NCADD New Jersey. And we hope to do something similar here at the council, because telling the stories of recovery from gambling is the best way to illustrate both the difficulties that problem gambling can land you in, and the hope of recovery from gambling, which is really what we want to emphasize here at the council. I should mention, I don't want to forget that coming up, I mentioned March Madness, and in March is Problem Gambling Awareness Month. We have a number of activities. For starters, some great webinars, which actually we've gotten a jump on. And I know that I think youth gambling is something of interest, maybe of great interest to you all. And you can find, we can find a webinar on our website, youth problem gambling, by one of our staff members, Luis, did a great job, and I highly recommend going through that webinar. It's recorded on our website, and all the webinars that we'll be doing leading up to March and through March, which we'll do four of, will be appearing on our website. So you can join it live, or you can see the recording. So what constitutes gambling? I'm going to give the short answer, and Phil may elaborate, but basically it's, any game of chance, and it starts very early. We see how gambling has expanded, and we're using it in the state to bring in tax revenue, which is a good thing, but it's also creating problems that we would like to see probably more of that revenue dedicated to education, prevention, and treatment, because certainly, as with substance use treatment, we need more of it. We certainly need more of it in gambling. Phil, do you want to talk a little bit more about what gambling is?
Absolutely.
Constitutes that?
Absolutely. And I'm going to preface this by saying this is the definition we use for someone who has a gambling problem. And gambling is any betting or wagering for yourself or for someone else on an event where the outcome is uncertain or depends upon chance or skill. So if you're buying a lottery ticket and you're wondering if that's gambling, it absolutely is. If you're going to play bingo, is that gambling? It absolutely is. If you were in a box pool for the Super Bowl and there was money involved, was that gambling? Yes, it was. And for a lot of people, these aren't problems. It's a innocent hobby for a number of people. For a small percentage of people, it becomes an addiction and a problem. And we'll have some signs during this presentation on what makes it a potential problem. But if you're filling out brackets, or someone in a school, a son or daughter is filling out March Madness brackets and putting in a couple dollars, yes, that's gambling. The simple answer is yes. Is it problem gambling? That I don't know. And only the person involved can answer that for themselves, but that's the longer definition of gambling.
Right. So how do you know if Phil just alluded to when are you straying into a trouble zone? It's not similar with substance use. Are you preoccupied with it? Are interests that you've had through the years falling by the wayside, and are your relationships with family, friends deteriorating? Is work suffering? School suffering? Inability to stop? One of the real signs is you say, okay, I'm gonna gamble for this period of time and only this much money, and then the time to stop comes. You continue on, and you pass you've exhausted your cap, but you keep gambling. Those those are signs that you've begun to get into a problem area with gambling. So again, there's many similarities with substance use. All those things would probably, at least most, the preoccupation, the loss of interest, deterioration of relationships. How addiction differs, and what we refer to it as is the hidden addiction, because there are no telltales, no outward telltales that someone has a gambling problem. They might be stressed, but stress could be due to any number of other things. They will be stressed, but they won't have the physical signs of a substance addiction. So that's probably the greatest difference between gambling and other, and at least substance addictions. Of course, there are other behavioral addictions.
And there's a big, and this is something I'm sure Daniel will talk about, but there's a large percentage of people who relapse when it comes to gambling. They think they have it solved or cured on their own and can get back into it and control it. And some people can, the problem gambler can't. And the suicide rate is higher in gambling addicts than it is in addicts to alcohol or addicts to drugs. And that's an amazing thing to consider, that a higher percentage of problem gamblers commit or attempt, have a suicide attempt. And that's how scary this can be. It can lead to money problems, work problems, home problems, relationship problems, and ultimately it can harm the person who's doing it the most when they self-harm. And for a lot of people, for a great percentage of people, it's just a hobby or they don't participate in it. But for that percentage of people who do, it's dangerous. And so what we ask family members, friends, is if you suspect someone is doing it and doing it in a problematic way, that's when you call our number. That's when you pick up the phone, call 800-GAMBLER. We'll try to assess, does the person have a problem? The person who is doing the gambling ultimately has to be the one to decide, this could be a problem, let me find out. But that's what we try to do here at the council, is help with that progression of, does the person have an issue?
Okay, so I'll talk. There are, I don't like stereotyping, but as I said, I'm new here, and they do talk about certain gambling characteristics that are more commonly found in men and others more commonly found in women. The major difference, I guess, is that men tend to, they thrive on the excitement, and they like skills-based, such as a poker game, maybe going to the racetrack, which I think Phil can talk about, the race, doing handicapping. Women are said to use gambling, get in trouble with gambling more as an escape. Of course, then age-wise, there's a whole spectrum of ways to gamble, from more traditional going to casinos, even going to bingo. That would be common for, say, seniors. And, for the most part, bingo is just, maybe a way to gather, and, there's not necessarily harm in it, but it is gambling. Of course, with the advent of sports gambling in the state and online gambling, it's all too easy to place bets, and that much easier to get in trouble with gambling. And youth are really seeing a lot of that. One thing somebody pointed out recently, that um, if you think about for somebody with, say, an alcoholic, imagine that person carrying a pint of vodka around with them all the time. Well, for somebody with a gambling problem, the phone is that bottle of vodka. We all have phones with us all the time. But for somebody with problem gambling, that means their phone is a potential for tremendous tremendous problem. Go ahead.
I'll try to handle the question that was asked, and what are some unconventional ways that there may be a telltale sign that someone's gambling? I will say there tends to be some restlessness, an increase in watching events, such as sporting events that you normally wouldn't associate that person with caring about. Let's say the person is a fan of a New York or Pennsylvania sports team, and suddenly they're watching a college basketball game between Oregon and BYU. Well, why are they watching that? You wouldn't think that's something they care about, but now they do care about it. Well, do they have a wager on it? It's possible. Do they need a bailout when you think they should have money? If a teenager is working, or even if somebody older has a good job, but seem to never have money, why is that the case? You may wonder, and it may not be gambling, but those are some possible signs. And a loss of friends, loss of relationships. And one of the reasons the term problem gambler, whether you like that term or not, there's also a term disordered gambling, and it's that you have your priorities in the wrong order. And a game, even if it's a video game or watching a sporting event, becomes more important than being with friends or family members. It seems like priorities have shifted or changed for no apparent reason. And gambling may be one of those possible reasons. So I hope I addressed that in the way the person who asked it was looking for. But you don't see the person walking around in a state of, well, that person's clearly inebriated, or that person clearly has a drug issue. Someone who's gambling, I could theoretically have stopped on the way into work today, got a water, and bought 2 lottery tickets, and no one would know, but I would know. And that's the first step, is realizing that the individual has a problem. The individual hopefully realizes that at some point.
So Phil used the term clinical or disordered gambling, which is the more clinical phrasing for problem gambling, and is what appears in the DSM-5, which I think most in this in the coalition probably know of it. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Behavioral Health, and so problem gambling does appear in the DSM-5 as a behavioral disorder. COVID has lent itself, has created, in certain respects, and especially with the proliferation of online forms of gambling, a perfect storm. People are inside more, they're alone more. Devices have, for good and for ill, taken over our lives too, and being alone during COVID will creates the potential for a lot more gambling. And I think we have seen a lot more gambling, both because of the just accessibility on our phones, but also because of how COVID has changed the way we conduct our everyday lives.
Yeah, and I'll pick up on a couple of things, and then obviously if there are more questions, just write them down or ask at the end. We'll try to address anything you need addressed. I know when I was in school, and this is middle school and high school, there was someone in the school acting as a very small-time bookie. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I was doing a little of that, not in a, I guess, technically illegal way, but I was handling the weekly football pool and I was handling the March Madness money. I wasn't passing it on to anybody else or any sort of syndicate or things like that. But that was kind of creepy backroom behavior. And now in a lot of states, that doesn't have to be hidden anymore. There are age requirements for legal gambling, but 30 plus states now have legal sports gambling. And New Jersey started it in 2019, and it's taken off. And it is now in New York as well, and in Pennsylvania as well. And just one number I'll throw out there is legal betting on the Super Bowl. It's just happened, legal betting. So New Jersey last year had $114 million in legal bets on the Super Bowl. But now New York got legalized sports betting. So you would think come this year, well, that New Jersey number would be down because New York is now legal and you don't have to drive across the George Washington Bridge to make a legal bet in New Jersey. Nope, New Jersey was up 22% this year. Over 140 million in legal sports bets on one event. And March Madness, traditionally, it's more games and over more weeks, but is about 3 times the Super Bowl amount. So you're talking about maybe March Madness in New Jersey will approach $400 million of legal sports bets. And it's an enormous number, and there's no sign of it stopping. There's no sign of it getting smaller. And you put, what are my opinions on harm reduction? When it comes to gambling and the problem gambler, I'm either you're in or you're out. For me, because I'm in recovery. I can't go bet $5 because I know that $5 is all I would be thinking about for weeks, win or lose. So I don't know if that's what you meant by harm reduction, but for me and the problem gambler, the easiest, and none of it's easy, but the easiest bet to avoid is the first one.
So I'll pick up on that a little bit, and that's an interesting question when it comes, because harm reduction, where substance use is concerned, is something I'm a huge advocate of. I believe in medication-assisted treatment and pretty much the gamut of harm reduction issues. And I mentioned our colleague Luis, who did the youth webinar recently, and he talked a little bit about gambling in the house, and so if it's impossible to eliminate gambling, how to allow for some gambling, but not too much gambling, and that would be that the parents would be involved in, they would sort of monitor the gambling, whether it's a poker game, whether it's on devices, what have you. Luis also, I'm borrowing heavily from him, but it was a really fine presentation, and he quoted Frederick Douglass saying that it's easier to build strong children than to fix broken adults. That's a great quote. So when it comes to youth gambling, education needs to start early. One of the things, again, I'm new here, I was astounded to hear about, and I've also, and family members have told me the presence of a bookie in I guess it shouldn't surprise me, but because I'm just learning about the field, it did surprise me. I guess when it comes to substances, I wouldn't have been surprised to hear about someone selling weed or whatever in school, that I wouldn't have been surprised to hear that. Having a on campus or in school bookie did surprise me. So it is quite prevalent. It's only becoming more prevalent again with the easy access of our devices. Adolescents have a much higher percentage than adults of problem gambling. Problem adults are in the range of, say, of 1% of all adults are said to have a problem gambling. Between 4 and 5% of adolescents are having such a problem. So that's dramatically more, and can create very serious problems that, if not addressed early on, will cause problems down the road. So
I'll throw out there a couple things that can be done and what happens when somebody calls here at 800 Gambler, what we try to provide them with. And there are some potential things that can help. And that's one-on-one counseling sessions. There are 40 some approved counselors who have taken our training, and they're around the state, and they help on a one-on-one basis. Oftentimes, you're getting out of my realm with the insurance and the coverage, but oftentimes those sessions can be free or greatly reduced in price. If the gambler has spoken to us first, there are meetings, Gamblers Anonymous meetings, as well as other meetings on the net. Gamblers in Recovery. It doesn't have to be a GA meeting. Like Daniel said, we're not affiliated with GA. There's software. If your kid is on the computer and you think they may be gambling on the computer, there's software you can install to prevent that or monitor that. One that I know of is called GAM Ban, BAN. That's a software that's sold. We're not affiliated with them either, but I know some parents and people have used that and said good things about it. And then the parents have to be on top of things too. Where are the kids getting the money? Where are they getting the credit card numbers? Where are they finding the ability to make these bets? Or are they simply taking out loans, falling into debt at this age? I mean, I started gambling probably at age 12 for dollars here and there that I had from whatever, babysitting or a birthday present. At a holiday, you don't have to give your kid a scratch-off lottery ticket for fun. That shouldn't be done until their brains are of an age where they can understand what they're getting as a gift.
Right. We partner at the holidays time. We partner with the lottery on an initiative, a campaign that basically strongly discourages, parents or anyone from giving lottery cards as holiday presents to underage, to teenagers or what have you. So. And the lottery is a good partner in that. They fully support that and are with us in that initiative.
The other danger. Yeah.
Sorry, I wanted to just jump in real quick when you talked about brain development. As a prevention educator for the Prevention Coalition of Mercer County in general, we know that brains and the way that they develop is so important at an early age. And we have a lot of studies that we cite and a lot of interesting information about how the DNA is actually loosened as children are young because they need to be open to those experiences. And the older they get, the more solidified that formation becomes. So I guess I wanted to ask in that same vein, because gambling is something that can be a coping skill, how can we sort of combat them turning to gambling for that coping skill? What can we replace with that?
It's a little cold outside, but I'm a big fan of going for walks. What can you replace it with? What can you replace it with the kids? I would say as many activities that you can participate with them that's a plus. What happens behind closed doors, we don't always want to know, but we should know. And you know what my kids were doing at age when they were 14 and 16, I probably don't know enough to answer that. Were they getting into trouble? I don't know, and I probably should have known. But I didn't see any problems on the credit card. I wasn't giving them gift cards. I didn't see any cigarette butts in the house or CBD packs or obvious drug use, and their grades didn't suffer. But monitor what you can monitor. And that's true with the gambling as well. They're probably not paying the internet bill. They're probably not paying the phone bill. Their kids are probably not paying the television costs.
Yeah.
So somebody is, and if you don't like what you see on those things, stop them.
Yeah,
and
so you
stop the
mentioned that
enabling.
calling gambling a coping skill, but it's not the healthiest of coping skills, right? So we would want to steer that. There are lots of coping skills that are better for us and better for our children than gambling. And it's a long list from, you know, what are their interests, you know, whether it's athletic, intellectual, social, you know, that's where we would want to direct them, not have them, you know, participate in gambling. That's not a coping skill we want them to fall back on and begin relying on, because that's going to most likely lead to some serious trouble.
I'm going to try to handle one of the questions I saw, and that was about a withdrawal period. And I can speak to some people I've seen in general, and I'll speak to myself. The most common number of days that's used as a withdrawal period is 90 days. Give us 90 days clean without a bet. And that seems to get you past the first hurdle of shaking. It's all I can think about. I got to get in on this game. Oh, there's a player I know. There's a horse I know that pulling the slot machine. I need to do it today. So that 90-day period is very important. And
just, you know, that's the same when people are new, whether they're in an AA room or NA, what have you, same thing, right? Go to 90 meetings in 90 days. So it's there's obviously a lot of from a 12-step standpoint, similarities between recovery from gambling and recovery from substances.
I'm going to give you just a personal example. When I was first in recovery, and I didn't really want to be in recovery, I was sort of forced into it. I had no other choice, I guess, or I didn't see one. I went to 14 meetings in 90 days. I went to a meeting a week. And when I got to 90 days, there were about 10, 12 people who regularly came to that meeting. When I got to 90 days, they said, "Congratulations, Phil. You're celebrating this 90 days. You can lead the meeting." I said, "Oh, how do I lead the meeting?" "Well, just call on people." And it was the same 10 to 12 people that were there every week. I didn't know one name because I wasn't paying any attention. I was going because I had to go. And, you know, so recovery, it's important that the person getting recovery, the gambler, is really into it. And we have the type of personality, many compulsive gamblers have the personality of, well, now I'm going to take recovery on 100% instead of gambling on 100%. And I can be successful in recovery. I can help others. And one of the questions that comes up is, well, why do you work at the council? I want to help other people, and I don't want anyone to call. I don't want anyone to have this problem, but I'm realistic, and I know people are going to call because people have this problem, and then I want to help them as much as I can. There were people there trying to help me when I wouldn't take help, but eventually I did, and now I'm trying to help others. And I know there are going to be some relapses. I know some people are going to fail in the program. I've known people with 10 years of recovery who have a relapse, but if they come back, I don't yell at them. I try to help them again. And it's not going to decrease in society. There are going to be lottery tickets at Wawa and 7-Eleven and Quick Check, and I'm not going to be able to stop that. And legal sports betting is increasing, not decreasing. And it's hard to watch a football game now and not see 40 commercials for it, and not see only the scores on the bottom of the screen, but the betting lines as well. So I watch less football, or I watch it on a couple hours delay. I'm more comfortable doing that. And that stinks because I love watching it, but it's not for me anymore.
Yeah, that was the case with my nephew. He's a huge sports fan, but that's what got him in trouble. So now he's wary of that. And with that March Madness coming up, he's got some concerns. So that's he's not alone there. So again, during March, we counter March Madness by trying to introduce some sanity into March. And I mean, sports are great, but sports are really getting taken over. I'm sure anyone who watches sports, it's astounding the number of ads, and that's a real challenge for us. Our executive director, Felicia Grandin, she speaks about that. I mean, we're really up against an enormous challenge because everywhere you turn, you see ads for gambling, and certainly if you're listening to a broadcast, or a telecast about of a game, more and more of the language is bet oriented. So it's really changing the whole environment of sports for the worse, in my opinion.
I agree.
So we could probably go on, but maybe if there are other questions. Again, we throughout March, but year round, the council is available and ready and eager to help people to not just work with people who are needing to get into recovery from gambling, but to educate people to do prevention. We'll be at the State House during the I think the third week of March, and have a presence down there to speak with lawmakers about concerns we have and issues. And so again, we're at it year round, and it's only more and more needed with the proliferation of gambling and its intrusion into every, especially on the sports front, but everywhere. It's just so available, too easy to access.
Thank you so much, Dan and Phil. I'm looking at the chat just to make sure that we have all the questions. There were some questions that I see that people may have it may have not been answered, or whatever. So how can you hear? It says, you mentioned the person needs to understand that they have a gambling problem and be ready to seek help. How can one help their loved one to see that they have a gambling problem if they're obvious, or if they're oblivious or in denial? I know that you sort of answered this, but any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll take it on. And on our website, on the 800gambler.org website, there's a 20-question yes or no quiz, and it is the general quiz used by the 12-step programs we mentioned today. But if your loved one has more than 7 yes answers to things like, did you go over budget when you were behind? Did you want to get your money back when you were ahead? Did you want to win more? If you have 8 or more yes answers, it's at least worth giving us a call, or at least worth going to a meeting, or at least look into, do I potentially have a problem? And you may come to the conclusion, no, I don't have a problem. I'm just gonna cool it down a little. It's something I can leave behind, and some people can. But the problem gambler most likely can't do it on their own. But hopefully I worked around to the answer of that. Try those 20 questions. And the last one's the scariest, and that's about self-harm, suicide attempts. If you're to that point, yeah, you probably have an issue with this behavior.
And on the youth front, so here, one of the stories I've heard since coming on here was a student who was a very good student. I think he got a scholarship at school, but his parents gave him a credit card or an ATM with a $50,000 balance on it. And he wasn't really so much of a gambler apparently before he got to college, but he made up for lost time. He quickly exhausted the $50,000 or capped that out, and then put another 50 on top with bookies. So he was $100,000 in debt in fairly short order. It doesn't take long. It doesn't take long to get into very serious financial trouble. Again, the betting is just on our phones. We can amass a big problem for ourselves in no time.
And one thing I'll discourage is what parents, loved ones often want to do is to bail out their kid. Let's pay this and this will never happen again, and you'll promise it'll never happen again. So we just, bailouts are discouraged. Well, what can you do instead? Let's say your kid owes $500 to somebody. Well, the kid should pay it off themselves. All right. If that's not realistic because of their age and that amount, you want to see that bill if you're a parent. You don't want to hand your kid $500 to pay the bill. You want to see the bill and you'll pay it yourself, and the kid will pay you back. You also want to tell that company, that person, that loan agency, whoever, don't deal with my kid anymore. And that's one thing New Jersey has that some other states don't, is a self-exclusion list. And the self-exclusion list you can do for, I believe it's a period of 1 year, 5 years, or life, that you don't want to gamble. And the gambler can only do that on their own, but you can do it. And I was speaking with someone today, and she had called me earlier the week and said, I want my husband to get on this self-exclusion list. I said, well, that's up to your husband. And then he did it, and did it for a period of 1 year. And this spouse called me back and said, well, why didn't he do it for life? I said, I don't know, but he's taken the biggest step. He's done it. Address that at a time down the line. She said, well, I shouldn't confront him about lying and doing it today. I said, no, he's done it for a year. That's good. It's a good start. So, it is different when you're dealing with younger people who don't have access to the amount of money, unless they're stealing it, that normally that we do. But it's something to watch out for, and don't just bail them out. And gift cards can be as dangerous as the lottery cards. So Instead of that, get them actual gifts. If it's a kid's birthday and they're requesting, oh, get me gift card, I'll go shopping. No, let's get you a gift instead. Nothing's going to be foolproof. If somebody wants to do it enough, they'll find a way to do it. But you're trying to deter it as much as possible. I hope that got you to an answer. But if we missed any questions that were hanging out there, you could always email us or ask them now if we just whiffed on them.
So I see a couple more questions.
Yeah, fire away.
So let's see here. I'm just trying to make sure. Oh, okay. So there can be a co-occurring mental health disorder with disordered gambling. So what are the correlations and why is there a correlation?
Well, I think you might have touched on it a little bit. A person may be depressed, and so a way to alleviate that depression is by distracting themselves with gambling, right? Some people will turn to substances and self-medicate that way, and others will self-medicate with a behavior. So that's that's just an alternate way that someone with a mental health issue would turn to gambling as again as a coping mechanism, but not one that's going to serve them well.
And if you do go to one of these places, let's say you're someone without a problem or you're just there for some other reason, if you go to a casino or someplace where there's betting, what else is there? Well, there tends to be flashing lights and bells and whistles, and everyone's having a good time, and there's alcohol, and you could probably find drugs somewhere, and it's all great, and it looks good in the movie, and it looks good in the commercials, and I want to be part of it. I'm missing out. It's that fear of missing out complex, and in real life, it's probably a sleazy sort of scuzzy type place with a bunch of people that are in there almost every day, and it's not what it's made to look like in the commercials or in the movies.
Yeah, I see someone in the chat says there's a remarkable negatively statistic in terms of co-occurring disorders. So yeah, that makes sense. There's also another question here. It says, is there a benefit of suggesting someone attend a Debtors Anonymous meeting if they are unwilling to see their behavior as a gambling addiction?
So I don't know of that, to be honest with you, but it sounds like anything would be better than doing nothing. I don't know about Debtors Anonymous. Phil, do you?
I don't.
Okay, that's definitely something to look into.
I'm going to say in the Debtors Anonymous is, and forgive me if I turn out to be wrong on this, but that's a term I haven't heard in a while, and maybe is a older, less specific term, but I would strongly recommend a loved one attend a Gam-Anon meeting if appropriate. And that's,
I'm glad you brought that up. We didn't. So again, like all addictions, gambling is a family illness. It doesn't just affect the individual who's doing the gambling, but obviously their whole family can be jeopardized by what happens in a gambling addiction to a loved one. So there is the Gam-Anon program is for the family to both educate them, support them, and as well as help them kind of maybe steer the gambler into recovery.
Definitely. There's also some people just putting stuff in the chat where it says 96, just going back to our co-occurring disorders, 96% of individuals with gambling disorder have one or more psychiatric disorders. Moreover, 60% of individuals with gambling disorder may have 3 or more psychiatric disorders. So that's definitely a correlation. So I think we'll be getting in touch more about that stuff. So is there anybody else that would like questions? I think we answered all of them. I don't know if there was a question here, but someone said an example of harm reduction, someone who is addicted to sports gambling instead commits to stopping that and instead engages in card playing. So that could be something that could be an example of harm reduction. So I think that's a good example to put in there. Anything else to add? Anybody have any other questions?
We're putting some contact info in the chat area if we're successful at doing it. I guess we're not. He's trying, but yeah, you can always get a hold of us here at 800 Gambler, or talk to me or Daniel specifically. He's getting his email out there, but it really was a pleasure talking to all of you, and hope we addressed most of those issues, and hopefully we could do this in person sometime down the line, or again on Zoom is fine as well.
Yeah, thank you for your participation and interest and good questions.
Well, thank you so much for having, the time and the dedication to inform us on this important issue. So we'll definitely keep in touch, and we'll have all their information and any other resources they mentioned in the links below when we hand this video out.
Yeah,
so
we'd be happy to follow up with you we can maybe narrow the scope. If you want to do youth, strictly youth, we could do that. Whatever, seniors too. It's a lot of seniors are at the other end of the age spectrum are getting in trouble. So all right, thank you again.
There's a whole broad spectrum. So thank you so much, and hope to see you again.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Likewise. Take care.
Have a good day.